Release the Kraken!
Greetings, fellow game designers. Ron here at Lame Duck Studios, and today is a devlog for Rocket Flip. It's been about a year since I've done one, and I figured I'd just get you up to speed on what I've done recently. It's actually been so long since I've worked on Rocket Flip that I wasn't really sure which project was the most recent. Yeah, it's okay. I did find it though. What's happened in the last year versus whatnot? Rocket Flip is actually not that difficult of a game, but it is something that I don't dedicate a whole lot of my time to. Between teaching and writing and making content, I only get so many hours in the day, and as much as I want to get this done, there's only one of me, so it does take a bit of time. What's sad is if I were to just dedicate like a month or two just to doing content for Rocket Flip and nothing else, I could probably have had it published 3 years ago. So I have about 10 days left of my vacation. I'm going to try to cram as much of that as I can into getting the features I want in Rocket Flip done and just have it published. And then I'll do updates and that sort of thing. Because I have other things I want to do, you know. One of the things that happened way back when, if you're looking at this, is you can see that I did update it from 4.23 to 4.24. So 4.22 to 23 to 24, and then I went to 4.26, and I got an error. I couldn't get it to actually update into 4.26. There were some modules that just wouldn't go, and I had completely overhauled and rebuilt the physics engine in C++ because I didn't like the way the rocket performed. In the older versions, it was too fast, and there were some elements to it. And if you've read my blog, then you would have seen, the headache with rotations that I ran into because Unreal doesn't like quaternions. There is a workaround in code which I did implement and finally got it working. But when I tried to transition into 4.26, I couldn't do it without essentially getting stuck with rewriting the whole thing, which I wasn't going to do. So even though it's a small project, it's a big project, and I get bored. So what can I say? So what have I done? So today really was all I did today was build a quick fix for the balloon, because in previous builds of the game, you could collide with the balloon when you got to it, and I went ahead and decided to make the balloon poppable. And that's pretty much all I did today. But the process of that actually took all day, because this is going to be a mobile game, and Unreal does not have, at least Unreal 4, 4.24, which is what I'm building in, does not have support for cloth physics on mobile. So that wonderful explosion and cloth ripping effect I had to do by hand. So that's what I did pretty much all day today. You can see this is the project, and I went through a few different headaches in doing this. Let me go ahead and hide that guy. So this is a simulation that is kind of done. This is a combination between using cloth simulations and Maya, and then I basically took a mesh and I cut it in specific areas that I wanted. And then I ran a cloth simulation. So if I hide this and I unhide my simulation piece, so here's the simulation piece, right? And if I run it, there's actually a little sphere that inflates and then suddenly shrinks. That causes an initial bump, which gives me a little cloth physics simulation. And then I actually took that, and I'm going to do a tutorial on this, but I basically took this at different stages along the timeline. I made duplicates. You can see the duplicates here. And then every time I would duplicate the mesh, I would get a baked version of this. And then I basically took all those and made them into blend shapes, which if I take my balloon here and I open up the blend shapes, each one of these is a portion of the expansion. So here's like a blend between the first part of the expansion, and then maybe a little bit later down the line, here's a blend between something a little bit farther, and so on. So I went ahead and just manually blended between a couple different frames. Now, there were like 96 frames in the initial animation, and I cut that down to about 12 different blends, and then I spread that across 25 frames to get an approximation of the event, which is what you get here. But then there were some headaches. So I went on Unreal Forms because getting this into Unreal was a number of complications. I tried baking it, which so when I went ahead and did a bake simulation, there's a option here to bake control points, and which basically bakes the position of each vertex. But that for some reason doesn't work when I try it. It actually ends up killing my simulation, and any other bakeable stuff just doesn't go. And I was wondering if it's because of my version of Maya, because I'm in version 2022, and maybe the feature that I wanted was in 2023. But I have to teach this coming school year, and I don't know what version of Maya I'm going to have on the school computers, and Maya is forward compatible, not backward compatible. So if I'm going to be teaching on 22 and I upgrade my computers to 23, then things that I make for my students or projects that I do won't make sense to my students. So I have to kind of be aware of that. So instead of upgrading, I'm like, well, since this isn't going to work, I had to find a workaround. And then getting into Unreal was its own level of headaches, because at first there were some problems with them with getting multiple meshes. Whenever running a cloth simulation, you end up with a if I grab this here, you end up with an output cloth node, and if this is output on your mesh, when you export it, it loses the cloth data and ends up dropping down to the default mesh that it was, which would have been the unsimulated version. So that was a problem. And then, so that would actually import, and it would import with all of the clones, which was an issue. And then it would also, once I got around that, there was another problem. So when you're working with blend spaces, inside the shape editor here, sometimes when you blend between two things, so blend shapes are a linear blend, which means that if something is here and something is there, it moves this vertex over, right? If this vertex is up here, it diagonally moves it over. It's a very linear translation. You'll notice that, like, if you're making a character with eyelids and you're using this, and the character's eye blinks, hopefully I'm in frame, the eyelid will go through the eye, and you get this weird half thing. So, like, if you're doing an eye, one thing you might run into with a blend shape is as the eye goes to close, the eyelid will cut through the eye. You see this here? So this is one of those things, like with blend shapes, because it's a very linear transition from one point to another. You get kind of weird things like that. So the thing that you would do is on your morph targets, and morph targets and blend shapes are the same thing, but they're just called differently. But on your targets here, you would just set up an in-between here, and then you would blend this out. So let's say, for example, let me grab my sculpt tool. That'll work. So I'm going to blend this out like so. And I'll blend the bottom of that out. Oops, too far. Like so, and then you would just save your changes, and then this would be the transition point between the eyelids. So now when I go to blink, it no longer cuts through the eye. Okay, so it is cut through the eye there. I have to go fix that. But the whole point of an in-between is to try to give the blend shape another spot so it gets a round effect, or it helps guide it to the way that you want. So The problem with that is when I would bring these into Unreal for the balloon, it would drop the in-between blend shape or the in-between morph target, and I would lose that data, and it just wouldn't run it. So I'd be in here, and all of a sudden I'm losing some of that blend data. I'm like, well what's going on there? So I ultimately had to do individual morph targets or individual blend spaces for each one of those transitions, and you can see down here, these are all of them running together because it wouldn't accept the in-between ones. So that was a headache. And then on top of that, once I got it into Unreal, you can see how this is going as it's expanding. You notice that there's a thing that it's not doing, right? So if I go back to Maya and I scrub through, what's the thing that it does? You can see right here, it starts to tear, right? And then as it gets farther along, it's torn, right? But in Unreal, it won't tear. It just stretches the mesh. And there are a couple spots where it did tear, but it wouldn't tear all the way. And I kept thinking, why is it not tearing? What's going on? And it just happened to dawn on me as I was looking, maybe the UVs are kind of glued together, and Unreal is using UV data to remap the mesh. Unreal doesn't like open meshes in general. It prefers to have a closed mesh. So what I had to do is, with the model here and the UVs, I had to make sure that the UVs were cut along the seams that I wanted them to be cut on. And doing this guaranteed that it would be, it would come apart the way that I wanted it to. But then there was another problem, which was interpolation. So when you have two frames of animation, so here's a frame and here's a frame, and you don't have anything in the middle, what a 3D application is going to do is going to interpolate or make some educated guesses about where the next change is going to be. Well, that's all well and good for most of your stuff, but with the simulation I was trying to run in Unreal, it would interpolate the frames backwards. So instead of the explosion moving upward, you can see the explosion kind of moves downward before it goes up. And I'm like, well, why are you doing that? And the reason for that was I had keyed every couple of frames, only the frames that I needed to get the animation across, which allowed Unreal to make some unfavorable guesses about how the simulation was going to be. So in turn, I had to go through and make sure that every frame was baked. So I went through and I did a bake on the simulation, and then I went through by hand and made sure that there was no pink anywhere. So on each frame, if there was any pink, I made sure to key it. That way there was no possibility that Unreal could make bad guesses, that it was going to get the frames that I baked. And then I moved all that over, and it worked. Of course, you do have to put a bone in this thing. Unreal will generate bones for you for certain meshes. Like if you have blend targets or morph targets or blend spaces, you can tell Unreal to put a skeleton in there for you. Again, you run into it could make a bad guess and do something you don't want. So I just threw on a single bone and then I skinned it real quick the way that I would want it to be, and then that just kind of reduced the amount of headaches. But this is where pretty much all of my day went, was trying to figure out, and this is kind of like how game design goes in general, is you approach the day with a task, and most of the time you're going to run into a problem. Even if you know how to do a thing, when you're running between multiple programs and you're trying to get things to work in a simulation, you're going to run into headaches, or you're going to run into roadblocks or problems that you have to solve. And it took me all day to figure out how I was going to animate this, whether or not it was going to work in Unreal, and then how I could get it to work in Unreal. So here was one day, and I have one effect. I got one effect, which is just doing the balloon. So this is kind of where all my day went. So I have nine days left. We'll see how much farther I can get with Rocket Flip. But yeah, this is kind of where I'm at. Other things in general, if you're still kind of watching the video, I'm trying to work on the Patreon page. Everything really goes there anyway. Um, Everything gets released early there, so if you want to see anything new, go there first, and then the series that I do, they get released, 1 or 2 videos a week, and I might make a 20-part series, so they just kind of release throughout the year because I have other stuff I have to do. So there's that. So I'm really taking my time to update the Patreon, so there's stuff there. And I also, I don't know, I have a green screen. Went ahead and set up the green screen for that just because it looks a little bit nicer and whatnot. And I don't like using Premiere. I actually use this thing, and you can see here in this video. I think the green screen is there. Hopefully I don't cut it out for this particular shot. But you can see the green screen's here. It's got wrinkles in it, but so that just makes it a little bit nicer. But this program is VideoPad. I've been using it ever since I think I started doing the channel, and I have Premiere. I pay $50 a month for the Adobe suite. I get a bit of a discount because I'm a teacher, but I pay a stupid price for software that I don't use because I hate it. I can't stand Premiere. I just can't. This software I pay about $60 every 5 years. About $60 every 5 years because new features come out and whatever, and I update it and some bug fixes, right? Whereas Adobe, I pay about $50 a month, and it's constantly broken. The only thing I use is Photoshop, and they're taking away the features that I use Photoshop for because they bought Surface Painter. They bought Surface Painter, and they're taking all of the features that were available in Photoshop and getting rid of those to kind of force people to use Surface Painter. And I can't stand that kind of stuff. But on top of that, the reason I don't use Premiere is this piece of software is garbage that I use, and I know it's garbage, but it works, right? I go to Premiere, and I load a video file into it, and my screen capture software gets audio and video at the same time. So I don't have to worry about syncing things up, right? Unless I try to build in Premiere. I go in Premiere, suddenly the audio does not line up with the video, and I have to do, and somebody in the comments is going to be like, oh, well, all you got to do is this. I understand that's all you got to do. But I'm saying, for how much I pay for it, I shouldn't have to do it when that's the industry standard software. I shouldn't have to. This piece of crap that I use, I just load the video and it works. I don't have to do anything else. I cut it up and whatever. And the only reason I was going to use Premiere is so I had better green screen features. But it works for what I got. So anyway, that's me ranting. The devlog kind of went into a weird territory. So that's what I'm doing with my time. And if you like this kind of stuff, let me know. And stay tuned, and I shall see you in the next one. And stuff. Oh, apparently I do this a lot in my videos, and my students find it to be a meme. So